Hey everybody, this is another How It Was Made episode presented by Continuify. I'm your host, Josh Hines, and today we're going to talk about how to pick your brand name. Before we jump into this, I kind of want to take a step back. As I was going through this and creating these videos, I came to the realization like I skipped such a big part about this that determines the way that you would even position your brand. So you might need to go back and kind of think through after kind of learning this new idea concept that's been around since Freud and Carl Jung that could definitely change the way that you want to position your SaaS company or product or service in the market. So jumping back, before we jump into brand name, we're going to talk about brand archetypes. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So there's a brand out there. It's called Iconic Fox that I feel like does this the best. And they go through. But essentially there are 12 different archetypes that people align with. And when thinking through what archetype you want to align with, a lot of times if you look at it, each archetype has an emotion. If you think about like the biggest brands in the world, a lot of them, they're not even selling a product or a service, they're selling an emotion. And a lot of times the emotion could align with the personality of the brand, but a lot of times it will align with the feeling or personality that you are trying to help your customers achieve. So take, for instance, Coca-Cola. Any of the commercials you typically see with Coca-Cola, whether that be your standard Coca-Cola commercials or the Christmas ones with the polar bears, the idea and feeling behind Coca-Cola is happiness. If you look at their commercials, they don't really even talk about Coca-Cola. Like, you know, it's a Coca-Cola because you've seen and engaged with that brand enough, but typically it's like the Coca-Cola bottle is almost secondary to most of the commercials, and the main theme is just happiness. If you think about Apple as a creator, when Apple first came out, they weren't selling Apple computers. Like Steve Jobs was a genius that he aligned Apple with the brand archetype. And it was like, you can create anything in the world. Like you can achieve absolute freedom and be able to innovate anything you want. You just happen to do it with an Apple computer. So it wasn't even like he was selling Apple, more so that he was selling the possibility that you can create anything you want. You just happen to create it with an Apple computer. It's pure genius. And I feel like a lot of times, especially when brands first start out, they're just relying heavily on features and capabilities. And the reality is, especially these days with AI and the ability that I can go to ChatGPT and say, build this out with me, and it would literally generate the code that SaaS brands are going to be able to basically, like, the moment one comes out with something great and groundbreaking. I mean, we've kind of already seen it with the AI right now. It's like one brand adapted OpenAI or Copilot into their software. And the next thing you know, everybody in that category all had the same exact capabilities. Or I mean, for the most part, the same capabilities. I mean, some of them went a lot better than others. But the idea is like you can easily replicate features and capabilities. What's hard to replicate is the feeling I get when I'm working with a brand. So a lot of times, like I shared, instead of thinking through when you're wanting to do your brand name or your colors or your fonts, or even like I shared, probably should have shared this with the brand positioning, even thinking about the archetype that you want to align with can dictate the position you take in a market, because it's going to be like the personality that you present, the words you decide to choose, and then the feeling you're trying to create for the people that you engage with and are selling you to. So for instance, I'm going to go through these really quick, but as you can see, there's 12 of them. Each archetype has a emotion. So like the explorer is freedom, the sage is about understanding, innocence is safety, creator all about innovation, magician is power, hero, mastery. We're going to kind of go through these, and you can do these printouts once you pick them. The idea behind this is you typically pick a core archetype. Like you don't have I like this about the creator, and I like this about the explorer, and I like this about the hero, and then you become this like multi-personality brand. The big brands, they typically align themselves with one archetype and they just go all in. But we're going to scroll down, and there's a whole bunch of things that if I'll add this into the video assets at the bottom in the description or on the page if you're on the website. But quickly going through the different archetypes, you can see there's a whole bunch of information. But so I'm just going to kind of go through each of the archetype and then kind of like sharing the brands that align with it. So outlaw, rules are meant to be broken. Virgin, very much disruptive in Harley Davidson, they're the rebels, and Diesel with the clothing brand. Then you can kind of see what drives them, what their fears are, and then even strategy, and then even like some color examples that you could use. So obviously, Harley Davidson is orange and gray, and they kind of align with the color palette. And then even talks to you about the strategy, and then a commercial. The Magician, power, it can happen. Coca-Cola, Disney, Dyson, all very open possibilities. Magic, how does a Dyson vacuum even work? Or Disney. And then we move into the hero, which is Adidas, Nike, FedEx. It's all about mastery. It's all about being the best of the best in your category. You're trying to master and reach your full potential. Just do it. Then we move into the lover, where we'll see Alfa Romeo, Chanel, Victoria's Secret. A lot of lovers, a lot of your women's brands, makeup. It's that I want to be accepted, intimacy. And then we go into Jester, M&M's, Old Spice, Dollar Shave Club. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. I'm the man your man wants to smell like. And we move into the everyman belonging. So IKEA, Target, Lennox. It's just I want to feel like I'm part of something bigger. And then we'll move into the caregiver. So UNICEF, WWF, Tom's. A lot of these caregivers are, the strategy doesn't work so much anymore. But I remember when Tom's first came out, it was like, for every pair of shoes you buy, we give away a pair of shoes for free. And then every brand under the sun kind of replicated that same strategy because it was that feel good, like love your neighbor as yourself. Then going into the ruler, this is where you have all your luxury brands like Louis Vuitton, Mercedes, Rolex. Power isn't everything, it's the only thing. And then the creator, which obviously we'll see Apple, Lego, Adobe. It's the idea. A lot of your AI brands obviously are aligning with this creator. You can create whatever you want. You just happen to use AI to create it. Extend yourself with AI. Create the future. The innocent, safety. So this is a lot of your cleaning, big pharma, medicine, trying to make you feel safe. And then Sage. So then you got Google, Oxford, BBC. It's those. I feel like a lot of course creators align with this Sage. A lot of your influencers could probably tap into this archetype a lot better and be able to stand out. I personally, I'll share what my brand archetypes are here in a minute, but I very much align with the Sage. As you can probably tell with a lot of my content, it's very much, I went out and learned something and now I'm sharing it with you so that you can understand it as well. Obviously Yoda. And then the Explorer, it's all about freedom. So the North Face, Jeep, Patagonia, don't box me in. So thinking through the Continify personality, I picked three, but they almost complement each other. So the Continify personality is very much like my own personal personality, but at the same time, it's very fitting because it appeals to the types of customers and clients that I'm trying to attract. I'm trying to, like, very much the explorer, that we want that sense of freedom. We want that sense of being able to go out and do whatever we want to do and be a pioneer in the space and build something great that other people can use. The Sage is very much like, we went out, we discovered, and now we're bringing this back and sharing it with you so that you can adapt it to your life, which you see a lot of SaaS brands doing that as well, where they'll build out this great platform that can get you all of these capabilities, but then they obviously have this plethora of knowledge of how to use what they built to leverage what you're doing to get even more results. And then, of course, the third pillar is the ruler. Like, we all want that sense of like control and boldness. And I am the master of my own fate type deal. So I kind of use all three of those, but over time, I'm definitely going to lean more into the explorer of being able to go out, especially brands that want to leverage HubSpot fully, being able to go out and fully leverage that platform and all of its capabilities and explore all the different things you can do with chat flows and workflow automations and sales sequences and programmatic advertising. Like, there's all of these things that you can explore to see what is possible and what things allow you to connect with the marketplace a lot better and present your story and your brand and your offerings so that you can increase revenue. And that would be like the core theme around my kind of brand personality and the archetype that I want to align with. These are more like fallbacks. So when you're thinking through your brand archetype and how the personality you want to align with, of course, you want to come up with a name that, especially these days, is memorable, but not something where people are going to be like, I don't remember what that was because it was so weird or off the wall. Again, going back to my explorer archetype, I kind of put myself right on the edge. But it makes sense when I explain like where the name Continuify came from. And for those of you that actually know Latin, I know I murder this word. I know it in Latin, it is said entirely different than how I say it, but I like how I say it. So for those of you that guys that know Latin, I apologize. But for me, it's like when I was thinking through Catino, it's like I was like, I don't know, I'm big into philosophy and like old school thought. So it's like I wanted to go something that like you had to like know the root to understand what it meant. So for me, I was like, I kind of went through and I'm like, all right, I'm working with SaaS brands. And the idea with SaaS brands is like, you're trying to attract people to your SaaS brand and then you're trying to hold them there as long as possible. So with that thought process, I'm like, is there a word in Latin that kind of bring together and hold? And then as I was going down this rabbit hole, I literally came to find out that there is a word and it's, I'm going to murder it, but it's like continuo or something along those lines. If you know Latin, I'm apologizing now, but it literally means con means together and tino means to hold. So in my mind, I'm like, bring together and hold, which is what every SaaS company wants to do, is that bring people on their platform and then keep them there as long as possible. And then the phi came in is because this handle was taken. So I ended up putting phi at the end, which is also like when I bought the domain names and the social handles, everything was phi. Like it was the time when like Spotify just came out and Shopify, all these phi brands. So I'm like, oh, I'm just going to put phi there. So that's where Continuify came from. But it literally means to bring together and hold. When you're thinking through your brand name, like you don't necessarily need to get creative. I mean, a lot of times, especially like when you're first starting out, especially if you're doing like coaching or consulting, you're almost probably going to do like a DBA where you're just going to use your name. I mean, some of the biggest brands in the world, it's literally the person's name. Like today, Tony Robbins is one of those brands that he just uses his name. I was on his calls today with the Time to Rise that he kicks off every year. But it's like you could be just using your own name depending on what you're wanting to do and how big you want the company to be. You could use your last name. A lot of brands go that route. But if you want to get creative and kind of think through something and create a name that kind of stands out, that kind of have a story behind it that you can explain it and people kind of have that like emotional remembrance. And it's like, oh, that makes sense. Like that's a cool name. Like, I mean, every time someone says my business name, they still say it wrong. But I'm like, hey, it's fine. It's all new. I've only been around less than a year, so I'm not too worried about people messing up the name. But thinking through your name, don't go too crazy that people are just like, I have no clue what that means. That's a dumb name. But at the same time, try to be something memorable so that at the same time you can, in the long run, copyright it or trademark it so that other people can't use that same name. And then thinking through like also with the name, you're most likely going to want to keep it on the shorter side. So when you are developing the logo, which is a video that we'll talk in this video series here in a couple days, that it's something that you can display well, both in print and social media on your website. So having a really long name kind of makes things clunky. So typically a couple syllables at most is probably your best practice in this case. But another thing to consider when you're determining your brand name is going out to GoDaddy or even going on all the different social platforms. I got links in the descriptions that kind of check this off for you. But when thinking through your brand name, you want to also make sure that the domain is available as well as the social media handles. Like I said, in the links below, I shared two resources that you can link out to. That I'll link out to GoDaddy so that you can check for the domain name. And then there's a social media handles checker that you can kind of go in there, put the handle of your brand name, and it'll check all the social platforms available. Well, not all of them, but the big popular ones, to see if that brand name is available as a business page on each of the social platforms. And that way, kind of give you an idea of like, hey, like as soon as I figure out my brand name, I go by the domain name, I set up my social media platforms, and then I know I'm covered with everything. Because the worst case scenario is that you come up with a name that you think's like new and exciting, and then you go out to social media and somebody's already using it, or someone's already got a website that's using that same name, and then you're like, well, back to the drawing board. But yeah, this is another video of how it was made. I hope you guys liked it. I'm Josh. This is Continuify. Until next time, keep building.